All right. Hey, everybody. This is Shaun Washington and Alex from Games We Don't Play podcast. We're doing an interview today for our friends at Southern Fried Gaming Expo in Atlanta, and we get the privilege of interviewing Mr. Warren Davis, Qbert creator. How you doing, Warren?
I'm doing well. Nice to see you guys.
Yes.
Thank you for joining.
We appreciate it. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk to you. Like we talked about in the pre-show, it's like we're all just so busy out in the world doing things these days. So,
Yeah, right. Exactly. Got to get a little sunlight on my face. That takes about 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I will just start out by saying this. When I was playing Qbert in the arcades, I was young and stupid, and that game was hard to me.
Fair enough.
I'm 37, so we're talking like mid to late 80s when I was in the arcade. I was like, I can't mess with that. I'm gonna run out of money trying to play Qbert too much. I don't have enough quarters to keep trying this game, and I need to go something that I can actually play for a while before my mom's telling me it's time to go.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel your pain. You got to get your money's worth when you go to those arcades. I certainly lost a plenty of quarters when I was hanging out there.
Yeah, if you think collectively, like let's say just between the three of us, the amount of quarters we spent in an arcade, we could have really invested in some things.
This is true.
So,
yeah,
well,
go ahead.
For me, it was money well spent.
True.
Oh yeah,
so
for sure.
Let me start off by asking you this one. How did you get into game development, just in general, even before Qbert came up?
Well, Qbert was pretty early on because it was literally my first game. The way I got into games was very accidental.
Okay.
I was an engineer. I'd gotten a master's degree in engineering. I worked for Bell Laboratories in the Midwest outside of Chicago for a few years. And I was not happy, and I quit. And I moved into Chicago proper. I just fell in love with the city, and I was unemployed for months, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was taking improv classes at Second City, or the
Awesome.
Second City, what was at the time the Second City Training Center, was called the Players Workshop of Second City.
Mm-hmm.
And but I would look at the want ads in the Sunday paper for engineering jobs, and one day I saw an ad for a video game programmer, and I was shocked because video games had been around for a few years. This was in the very end of the 70s. It was 1981, and so they'd been around for about 7-8 years. But I couldn't imagine that somebody was just putting an ad in the paper for a video game designer or programmer. And I answered the ad, and it took about a week of my letter getting to them, they getting back to me. I'm waiting for interviews, and it all happened around Christmas, 1981, and New Year's. And very early in January, I started work at Gottlieb.
That's awesome. I'm from Chicago, so I like the Chicago connections. I've been to Second City. It's a great place.
Great city.
That's awesome.
And that really shows like the distance and like the connection between like where games are now and where they were then is sort of like your process in getting a job. Like no internet, no online job monster thing. Like it was just like you had to open a paper, look for a thing. And so that really blows my mind that like it was a want ad. Like we are looking for.
I had to carve my resume in stone. And then, put it on the back of a donkey to get over to me.
Oh, so you were pre-papyrus.
Yeah, right.
That's funny.
It feels that way sometimes.
So after, this is one of the things I like to, ask people that created things. Like after your Qbert's done and it's out there in the world, and the first time you see it out in the world, like what was that feeling like?
Oh, it was crazy. I mean, I literally couldn't imagine it. I remember going down to the manufacturing plant. We had our engineering offices were off in the corner of this huge, large building where they actually had the manufacturing where they built the games. And I remember going down and just seeing, like 100 Qberts just standing in a row that they had just built. That was just incredible. I mean, literally mind blowing. And
that's amazing. So you saw it all in house. Like it wasn't like this goes out to somebody, comes back. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, the thing about all of those game makers is they were manufacturers. They
Hmm.
really didn't make money off of the players putting the quarters in. I mean, indirectly they did, but the business model was they sold these games, they built and sold these games to distributors. The distributors put them out in the world, and usually the distributors had some kind of deal that involved taking part of the cash box, but the manufacturers really did not.
Now, as you were going like through the design, did you have like a magic moment where like, oh, this is going to be something? I mean, because like, and like as Shaun was saying too, like, and I am a little older than Shaun. I'm 44, and so, but I was like, I was in that sweet spot, you know, where like I was at the arcades, I was playing the games. I remember the Pac-Man fever, the Qbert, the Donkey Kong, like it was everywhere. So, did you at any moment think like, this is something? Like we got a little magic here.
Uh, Not really. I mean, the magic moment for me, because it started out for me, it was just a programming exercise. I was just trying to teach myself some coding techniques because I'd never made a video game before. But the magic moment for me was when I realized there was a game here, and so that was the aha moment. And then I just was like, okay, let me finish this game. The only inkling that I got that it might be successful is just from the reactions of other people at Gottlieb. They were all so excited about it. They really believed it would be good, and I, was just trying to keep up and not fall flat on my face.
And then like a lot of games in that time were very like a sort of straightforward linear structure. You know, it was like go forward, go left, or go right. Like those were your directions. How did you come up with that sort of like idea to go a little bit different? You know, that isometric sort of style where it's just like,
Yeah.
because for me, like that was like, as Shaun was saying, the frustrating piece, like your game and Zaxxon were two challenges for me because the plane was shifted. You know, it
Yeah.
wasn't just up, down, left, right. You had to have some understanding of like the physics.
True, and I'd say it probably all started with Jeff Lee, who is the artist who created all the graphics for the game. He is the one who sort of came up with the Escher-like, cube-like thing, just
Mhm.
playing around. He didn't shape it into a pyramid. That was something that I kind of saw in my head. He had it filling the screen. It was just like, I think it was something like six blocks, background blocks that repeated in this pattern that made it look like the screen was filled with cubes. And I just thought
Mhm.
that was really cool. So I wanted to do some stuff with that. I think I was always interested in doing something that was a little different, not just the status quo. And the ability to add an extra dimension to a game was, like you said, pretty unusual at the time. So,
Mhm.
and it was challenging to work out the physics, especially collision detection. But I was game to do it, and I'm probably too stupid to know that it was hard. But I just kept plugging away at it. And the thing, the beautiful thing is I had no pressure. I had no deadline. My job was make a video game. And to the credit of my bosses, Ron Waxman was the VP of engineering. Howie Rubin was the VP of business development. And they just left us alone. They were like, yeah, do your thing. So
That's awesome.
I just plugged away, and it just turned. And now, as far as the isometrics, that just came absolutely naturally. If you look at the play field, you don't have a choice, right? If you want to go
Right.
down, you have to go to the left or right. If you want to go up, you have to go to the left or right. So I didn't think that was revolutionary in any way. It was always amazing to me how many people couldn't kind of grasp it.
Yeah, because I mean, it was a challenge for me because I mean, it functions like a tessellation, like you were saying, it's six, this repeating pattern. But it's like when you compare it to like like I mentioned, earlier, like a Donkey Kong, you went left, right, up and down the ladder, like, and so it's very like XY axis. And so when you throw in this other element, it's like it's simple, but it was brain breaking because it was complex. And I had mentioned to Shaun yesterday, I said, because clearing a board on Qbert was like, you did something. It was exciting. But I told him too, I said, but it was also a game you knew it frustrated people because it always had the loosest joystick because people were just,
Well, that was one of the things that worried me, but I felt very vindicated when it was out on test, because part of the process of any video arcade game is manufacturers would put their games out in some arcade nearby, and we just monitor it. We'd monitor the cash box, and we'd monitor, I would go to an arcade and just sort of hang back and watch people play. And it was very scary to see people just kind of jump right off the pyramid first quarter,
Yes.
plummet and die. And I thought, oh my God, because people at, Gottlieb were warning me about stuff like that. They were encouraging me to, not allow you to jump off the pyramid. And I was like, no, it's got to be somewhat challenging. But the beautiful thing was that people came back, and then they would play it again, and they would play it, or they would watch other people who weren't falling off and dying. And so it all worked out.
Yeah.
Definitely. Now, how did you come up with like the Qbert Sound? Like, how was that born? And even with that too, like the idea of like censoring his language. I mean, that was so like at that time we weren't in a place where games were really doing that. Like having a language or a response.
Right. Well, the sounds were all the creation of a really talented guy named Dave Field. He was basically the third member of the team. I've always said Qbert was the product of our triumvirate, me and Jeff and Dave Field. We had this chip on our soundboard. It was a voice chip. It was supposed to replicate human speech, but it was pretty terrible. It sounded very robotic, and Dave used it on a couple of pinball machines and just had bad experiences with it, and he really had a hard time getting it to say things. But when he saw Qbert and the way the game was evolving, he thought this was a great opportunity. So he just threw random phonemes at this voice chip. And I heard it and I was like, yeah, that's fantastic. I do remember giving him a little instruction when Qbert jumps off the pyramid and plummets. I wanted a which he supplied brilliantly. So yeah, it really was just a great collaboration among three people who had nothing to lose.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
now,
it really did make its long-standing mark for sure.
Yes.
It was another element that was like, for what gamings were at the time, very progressive,
No, thank you. Yeah, I never would have expected that. It still amazes me to this day, but it has turned out that way. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you, do you mind if we talk about some of the other games that you've been involved with?
Please.
I guess we got some questions. Like I didn't even, Alex informed me, a game that a lot of people my age didn't really play. It was kind of towards the PS1 era, was Revolution X. Now, I love that game. I spent a lot of money on it at the arcade. I actually owned it on PlayStation 1. And
wow.
yeah, exactly.
I don't know that was that a decent version? I mean, obviously I only worked on the arcade version, but
yeah, I would say as a 12, 13-year-old, I thought it was fine.
it was amazing.
Yeah, I thought it was fine. I thought it was cool that you could like actually put the game in a stereo and just play the tracks. Like you could just play the songs that were in the game. So that was cool to me. But yeah, I was like, I freaking love playing like, first person, like real shooters at that age. Like those were like so awesome. So like, how did you, like, where did it come? Let's get a first person shooter and Aerosmith has got kidnapped and let's just run with that.
Well, okay. So, I wasn't one of the leads on that game. The two leads were George Petro and Jack Hager.
Yeah.
George was a programmer. Jack was an artist. And they were the leads on Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Right, yeah. I like that game too.
I came in to Terminator 2 Judgment Day, joined that project midway. And that game, as you know, was a huge success.
Yeah.
And we basically kept the team kind of together for Revolution X. But it was definitely George and Jack's concept. And they really wanted to get a band, a real band. One of the things I can take credit for is the digitization technology. That was my system, that we were able to actually digitize live actors and then get them in the game fairly quickly and easily. And we used that system from, NARC, years earlier.
Yeah.
We used it. Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3, NBA Jam games all used that system, and I kept improving it every time we did another game. by the time we got to Aerosmith, we had a studio set up where we could just point a camera. You know, we had a blue screen. It was lit. We could strip out the background quickly. It was a pretty robust system. And the other thing I did for Revolution X was I wrote the display system, which is basically the rail system. So you had, whereas like T2 had a side-scrolling multi-plane display system.
Yeah.
So you basically just move side to side. The Revolution X display system I was very proud of, because you could move up, down, left, right, in, out. It had stuff to let you switch. Like if you went through a doorway, there was a transition where it would load up a new thing without much of a lag time. So there were a lot of things in that I thought were really pretty cool from a programming point of view. I did do little bits of game design in that, but mostly it was really George and Jack who came up with like the concepts and stuff.
Okay.
But the coolest thing about Revolution X was we had Aerosmith in our blue screen studio in Chicago for 3 13-hour days. They showed up in their bus. They came in. We had a green room for them, a dressing room. They brought all their costumes, and George and Jack had pages and pages of stuff they wanted to get from the guys, all the band members, and we just shot them for 3 days straight. And
that's amazing.
It was insane, is what it was. And they were great. They were so down to earth and easy to get along with, and they were game for pretty much anything.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that must make it really nice too when you have someone who's not in the industry, not part of the design, just as a participant, when they're like, let's do it, let's jump in. It's going to bring a nice energy to it as well. That's like, let's build upon it. I know that when I first played Revolution X, and I could clearly remember, like, because it was also like Aerosmith was Aerosmith.
Oh yeah.
That like they were it, and so it was just like I remember being in a round table pizza, like, and it was like my cousin and I, we just like, it blew our mind. He was like, that's Aerosmith. And it was because we were used to pixelated characters. The block does the thing and he's made up of other blocks, and it was like, no, that looks like my TV. Like, that's like, what, it was just that realism that came through. It's just like, this is amazing. And even if we died a ton, it was just like, we just wanted to be immersed in that setting like that. Like it shifted the perspective for us, because it was like, I want to be in here and do everything else along the way. And that was like mind blowing. And that, again, another part in the progression of modern day gaming.
Right. So I'm doing like, oh, go ahead, Warren.
Well, I was just going to say that was, something that I had always aspired to. Even when I was doing Qbert, I always thought, I feel like this is where the industry is going. The graphics are going to get better. We're going to get more realistic, photorealistic graphics. And that was the direction I was always interested in. So when the first digitizers came available in the mid 80s, I was working for Williams. I was actually working on Joust 2. But when that was over, I started playing around with these digitizers for the Amiga. And just, doing some preliminary work, just sort of seeing what I would have to do to be able to use these to get them into the game, because we had limited colors. Usually if you digitize something, you'd have thousands and thousands of colors. So I started researching algorithms for reducing the colors, and then I was writing tools, and it was a fun time for me. I loved it. And then eventually it bore fruit. There was a board that came out for PCs called the Targa board that allowed you to digitize, and that's really when it became practical for us.
Okay. Yeah. So let me ask you another credit I see on with your name on it is WWF WrestleMania. So is it like that the same thing you did? You have to like work with wrestlers on a blue screen, or did they just use your tools, or were you involved, or how did that work?
Yeah, that was really just them using my tools.
Okay.
Probably the best looking use of my tools, I would say, because by that time they had not only upped the pixel resolution. We had a hardware designer named Mark Lafredo, and he was responsible for constantly improving our hardware. So, whereas at the very beginning for NARC, we had like a total of 256 colors for the whole game. But by the time we got to WrestleMania, we had hardware that allowed us to create multiple palettes of 256 colors, so a character could have his own palette. And we also upped the screen resolution, the pixel resolution, which used to be 256 by 240, but then we moved to 512 by 480. So you had finer pixels, greater color resolution, and the images looked really fantastic. And then we scrapped it all for 3D. Just when it got good, the moved to 3D hardware.
I would say that was definitely the mark. Like those games for me, I definitely really like the digitized look, because you play those games at the arcade and then you see like, I can bring that home. Like, you know, like that's really, you know, I think that's the mark of a good arcade game, or like good tools or good design. Because, you know, there's certain like arcade games you're like, that'll never work at home. Like I don't think that that's going to be something that I would like to do. But I'll definitely say even Qbert, like the games that you've been a part of, those I feel like they have the potential to translate well as long as it's a good port.
Well, one of the things I think we always tried to do when we were making arcade games is create games that would not easily translate to the home system, because we always felt that, you know, being manufacturers of arcade games, we wanted an advantage over the home systems. And technically, at the beginning, we did. You know, the home systems weren't as good, but the home systems got better and better. And we couldn't afford to match them at one point. I mean, we couldn't have the graphics horsepower in an arcade machine that some of the graphics cards did at home. But you know, when we first started doing digitized games at Williams, I think it was hard to get that same level of graphics quality in the home versions.
I will say, like, speaking of Chicago, so me and Alex, we went to the I don't know, you heard of C2E2 in Chicago. They have
say again?
C2E2. It's like the Chicago Comics and Entertainment Expo. So they have that every year. So that was in this past February, and me and Alex were there. And one of the things we did at night, they have a couple of arcade bars there, and all the arcade machines are like, you know, late 80s, early 90s. I'm pretty sure that there was a Qbert machine at the bar we were at one of those nights, that we were drinking old fashions and watching people play Qbert in 2020. So, I mean, I think that's pretty cool.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. I mean, I've been going to retro gaming shows all over the country the last few years. And I remember being up pretty much everywhere I've gone. You know, there have been Qberts, but I really had a great time over at Ground Control in Portland. Have you ever been there or heard of that?
I've heard of it. Yes, I've heard of it. Yes.
Yeah, and that was, I just thought, you know, this is amazing. That was probably the first barcade I ever saw. So yeah, it was really, just astonishing. People are still enjoying those games, which is fantastic. It's very rewarding. I'm happy that people are.
It's funny how, like, I was going to just say, it's funny how when you first hear like a barcade, it seems weird, and then you go and you're like, why haven't we always been doing this?
Yes.
Well, because the people who used to play those games were like 12 years old. That's
right.
why.
Yeah. But it really shows too the sort of transition in time. Like, you know, the gaming still does have the stigma of like, oh, it's a kid's thing. But then, like, you know, mentioned, like, for us, like, you know, we're senior gamers. We've been doing this for years and haven't stopped. And I always tell people it's very similar to someone who has a passion for baseball or football. Like, it's that same thing. I can talk history. I can talk, do you remember the first time you played Qbert? Do you remember the first time you saw Narc? Like, those were things that were like, oh my God, this is crazy. And so then to have the opportunity to revisit and hear, like, even like, I have a MP3 file on my computer somewhere that is just classic arcade sounds. And it's like, to be back in that moment where it's just, you heard all the noises and the cling. It's like being in a casino in Vegas, but just, you know, it's like, you know what that sounds like. And so when I've been to a few barcades, and it's like, to be able to be back in that moment and be nostalgic with your friends. And quite funny too, is one of Shaun's friends came and brought a large bag of quarters and put it down on one of the games we were playing, and it was just like, yeah, because that's how you did it back in the day, you know. So when we get to grow with these and then remember, it's like, it's really fulfilling. Like, it's one of those things that like warms your heart, because it was an awesome moment in time. I, you know, as we kind of get towards the tail end, I did want to ask, what's what's your level of involvement now? And do you still play any games?
I do play some games. I don't really play that many. I'm actually still working marginally in the games industry. I do some consulting for Sony, um, but you know, I don't really find myself attracted to a lot of modern games. I think one of the places where games kind of lost me is they became, they didn't become as interactive as I want. A lot of games focused so much on story, and it was just basically interactively watching a story, and maybe you jump in and do some things. I really like, I do like, you know, some of the modern games. I'm amazed at the technological advances we've had. The Spider-Man game for PS4 just fantastic. And
Yes.
I just got The Last of Us 2, which I haven't really you know, dove into yet. Um,
I just
I
finished that
love
last night.
I love VR. I have to tell you, VR has been a dream of mine, just like digitizing was. You know, the idea of truly immersive, you know, virtual reality is a huge thing. And I have a PlayStation VR, which I love playing those games that are designed for that. Um, but yeah, so yeah, I'm still marginally involved, but not like I used to be. It's one of those things. I think, you know, when you've been on the other side of the curtain, it does
Yeah,
lose a little bit of the allure. Yeah.
I feel you. Now let
I
me.
could definitely could agree with that.
I'll say, you know, my friends would kill me if I didn't even ask you to kind of talk about how you got involved with, you know, Southern Fried Gaming Expo and, you know, becoming a guest and come, you know, actually, you know, making an appearance there next year and things like that.
Yeah. Oh man, I am so disappointed.
Yeah, me too.
It's not
Yeah,
happening.
yeah, me too.
You know, and it's not just because I'm trapped in my house. I really was looking forward to it. I ran into Patrick at the Free Play Florida show
Okay.
last year.
Okay.
I was down there. I had brought my book. I've written a book. I don't know if you guys are aware.
Yes,
I,
I was literally going to ask you about that next.
I have it right here. Oh, look at that.
Okay.
What a
Yeah.
coincidence.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I wrote a memoir because like I have been doing a lot of these retro gaming shows over the last few years, and I just love connecting with fans. I mean, it's, you know, it really is gratifying to me that people still enjoy my work so many years later, and I just love hanging around with those people. So I've been going to a lot of these shows, and I realized a while ago that I couldn't really tell all the stories that I wanted to tell about any particular subject in a 45-minute or an hour talk. So I just had this idea a few years ago. I should write a book, which I've never done before. And it took me a while. It kind of germinated, and I had to think about it, and I had to sort of work out the details. But yeah, here it is years later, and I've got it, and
That's awesome.
it's gotten good feedback. I've gotten good feedback from some reviews in some magazines, and just the people that I've sent it to, people who purchased it and read it seem to like it. And I had it with me down at Free Play Florida for the first time. It was the first show I ever took it to,
Okay.
because it is available online through two websites, but it's not, I don't really market it. My thought was I would take it with me to shows and I'd be able to autograph it for people. So I was
Okay.
very disappointed that I couldn't come down to, you know, Southern Fried Gaming Expo. I love Atlanta. I've only been there a couple of times before, but I love that city, and I've never been to a show in that area of the country. So yeah, it's really, really bummer. But there's next year. So.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
I've been trying to convince Alex to come out to the show for a couple years now, but yeah, I was definitely disappointed. Last year, I was out of town at the time. We had a loss in the family, so I wasn't able to make it. But it's like it's one of the few conventions that me and my son go to every year. You know, my son is 13 now, and we've been going to this convention. I think I've gone 4 or 5 times, and he's gone 2 or 3 times. So it's just like, you know, the pictures every year, he just gets bigger and bigger and bigger that I, you know, take him, and you know, it's a pretty awesome thing to do. And it's just a very friendly environment. You know, it's just like everybody's getting along, having fun, playing games that they used to love or finding new games. And one of the things that I've been doing recently is rebuying all the retro consoles. So that's a great place to find some retro things, some games and consoles to get. So I always love going there.
Yeah, me too. I love going to these shows just because, again, the community is very welcoming. They're very chill.
Yeah.
People are there to have fun. And listen, that's why I got into the business. Is I love to have fun. I mean, I really never I thought about doing something maybe more important with my life as an engineer than making games, but I honestly, I think that's really what I what I enjoy the most and best use of my talent. So yeah, fun is a very important part of life. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And what's more important than bringing memorable joy to people? Like that's a huge impact. Like when you think about the two of us, two strangers, like having a conversation with you today, and we both have these moments of like, I remember, I can take you back exactly where I was when I played the games, and the excitement I had, like I said, when I cleared a board, and it was just like, that was awesome. And that something you conveyed to me, so you really did some amazing things.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, and I pretty much just lived my life in obscurity for many, many years. So a lot of this is just so shocking, because Qbert was never designed to last this long. It was just like any other game, got replaced by the next game, and I went on to other things. So by the time I left the arcade industry, by the way, when I left the arcade industry, I went into the home game industry for a while. So, and I was making games probably till about 2008, I want to say. And that's when I kind of got out of the games industry for the most part. But no, I don't know that I was going anywhere with that.
Well,
waxing philosophical,
So do you want to plug your any social media handles or websites for your book or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So the book's available on a site called blurb.com, and if you go to blurb.com and just search for my name or search for Warren Davis memoir on Google, that will take you there. The thing about Blurb is that it's available worldwide, which is pretty cool. So it's not just limited to the United States, but you can't get an autograph copy delivered to you. There's another site called Warren Davis Square. Wait a minute, what is it? Yeah, Warren. I think it's Square. I don't. Okay, now I gotta look it up. Anyway, don't go away.
Okay, we won't.
Hang on. I should know this, but I'm not a marketing person.
I'm sure it's in your favorites.
I'm sure it's Warren Davis .shop. Wait a minute. Warren Davis .square .site, I think is what it is.
Okay.
Anyway, the thing about that site is that you can order an autographed copy, but it's only in the United States.
Okay.
And if anybody likes the idea of an autographed copy, you can also buy something on Blurb, and you can bring it to the show next year. I'll be happy to sign it. Happy to sign it for you.
I'm definitely gonna bring my copy and get a copy of the book for you to sign next year, because I'll definitely be there.
Please do. Please do.
Chalfie, any last questions or comments before we let Mr. Davis continue the rest of his day?
I just have to say, I really appreciate this time we got to sit with you today. Like I mentioned earlier, like, your history really like marks moments in my life. And so seeing like kind of being there early on in gaming and then seeing where we are now, like your stamp is there. And so I really say thank you so much for what you've contributed to modern day gaming, and the history of it. Thank you so much.
That is very kind of you. I thank you very much. Thank you for being the recipient of my work. Again, if it weren't for you, then we would not be here. So thank you both.
Yeah, thanks again. And everybody, stay tuned for more for the the virtual Southern Fried Gaming Expo this year, and hopefully everybody who sees this or listens to this can make it out to Atlanta next year and enjoy Mr. Warren Davis in person. I'm sure he'll be on the panel discussing something, or
I
just
would love to
catch him playing Qbert.
Yes,
I'm planning on it. And I hope to see both of you guys out there. It'd be lovely to meet you in person.
I will definitely be there.
Yeah, Sean's been trying to get me to go for a while, but I'm over here in California, so it's a little bit of a travel.
I'm in California.
Ah.
What do you say? Road trip? You wanna
Let's do
drive
it.
out?
Oh man, let's do it.
All right,
Contact
guys.
me and wait, when's the? Do we have a date for the show next year?
I believe we do. I'm gonna be official. I'm not gonna guess because then Patrick and Preston would definitely hurt me. It is June 11th through June 13th of 2021.
Oh, geez, I'm busy. No, I'm kidding. I am planning to be there.
All right.
All right, Warren, we're getting a motorcycle with the sidecar. Let's do this.
I'm there. I'm totally there.
Thanks again, Warren. You all have a good one.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
take care, guys.